James was a 16-year-old boy who lived in a small town where acres and acres of farmland could be seen. If James wanted to go to the neighbor's house, it would take him roughly 20 minutes to get there and another 20 minutes to get back to his own house. James wasn't a popular kid in school, so his circle of friends was very small. He mostly took care of the family farm when he wasn't in school. Every day he would wake up in the morning, get ready for school, eat breakfast, and on his way to the bus stop he would open the gates to let the cattle to the next field, one that was more vast for the cattle they had, and before the sun set he would bring the cattle back to the smaller fenced area for the cattle to rest overnight. Bringing the cattle back in was always a challenge, as some of the cattle would get in places that just left him wondering how they got there. He would always take on this task using a horse, so that made it a bit easier for him to manage the cattle. James' routine was always the same, day in, day out. There wasn't really much excitement in his life. One day after school, James decided to ride his horse to do some exploring around the farmland, and after a few hours he discovered a cave, one that he hadn't seen before. He decides to go in the cave riding the horse until the cave became little as a crawling space and could no longer ride in with his horse. At this point, he decides to unmount the horse and tries to crawl further in the cave. He crawled roughly about 30 feet. After that, the cave went back to being a big wide cave where he could walk or even jump if he wanted to. James wanted to continue, but there wasn't much sunlight that shone in there, and he did not have a flashlight as he did not plan on finding any cave or even exploring a cave. He stood there for 5 minutes, looking around at whatever he could see, and decided to go back to the cave the next day, more prepared with flashlights, batteries, and a lighter just in case of anything. He crawled back out of the crawling space and mounted his horse and rode the rest back out. He quickly realized that the sun was beginning to set. He makes it back to his farmland and begins to steer the cattle back into the smaller fenced area, and notices one of his cows is missing. This was normal for him, as the cattle always got to weird places. He would always wonder how they got there. He tries to hurry up and find the cow, as he had very little bit of daylight left, and after searching for it, he finds the cow close to the cave where he had been exploring earlier, and wonders as usual, how did that cow get there? Or was there an opening in the fence? Without thinking twice, he decides to hurry up and steer the cow back to the farm so he could join the rest of the cattle, and also thinking about dinner that his mom was getting ready to cook. Once he made it back to the farm, he unmounts his horse, takes a shower, and eats dinner. Then off to bed it is for him, as he was tired from the long day he had. He quickly falls asleep. The next day, he wakes up and goes through his normal routine, gets ready for school, eats breakfast, opens the gates for the cattle, and gets back on the school bus. Anxious to explore the cave further more than what he did the first time, James just can't wait till school is over with for the day. Finally, the last bell rings and school is over with. Now he's headed back home. The bus ride felt like it dragged on forever, but once home, he quickly goes to his room and gets a backpack full of supplies that he had listed for the cave exploration that he was about to engage in. Inside his backpack, he was carrying a flashlight, batteries, snack cakes, a lighter, water, and a first aid kit just in case of any little incident while exploring the cave. With the backpack ready, he mounts his horse and heads back towards the cave. As he approaches the cave, he notices the same cow just standing near the cave, but this time the cow was much more closer to the cave entrance than the last time, as if something had called it there. This was a problem for him as he could not explore the cave while cattle is just running loose out of the fence line, so he decides to steer the cow back to the herd. But as he was about to do so, a sound starts emanating from the cave. It was a cow mooing. That was something new for James, as he had never had to retrieve any cows from this area before. He normally had to retrieve them from the farm roads, neighbors' farms, or even from the woods behind the house, but never from this area before, let alone the cave. Quickly, he unmounts his horse and reaches for the flashlight in his backpack and starts to go in the cave. He enters the caves and walks about 20 feet into the cave until he reaches the crawl spot, and then the sound stopped. There was no cow in sight, and James knew that the cow didn't go into the crawl space as it was too little for the cow to fit in. Both puzzled and confused, James turns around to head back out of the cave, makes it to his horse and remounts it to take the other cow back to the herd. Once James had taken the cow back to the farm, James decided to count the cattle to see how many more were missing, and is relieved to see that all the cattle is there and that none is missing, so he decides to put it past him whatever he heard in the cave. Making his way back to the cave, he looks at the time and figures he has about 2 hours left to explore the cave before he has to be back to steer the cattle back in. He makes it back to the cave and unmounts his horse, gets his backpack and starts to enter the cave again. He walks 20 feet into the cave, wonder how he's going to crawl in it with his backpack, but quickly figures it out. He will drag his backpack with his feet as he's crawling. He makes it through the 30 feet of crawling space and is now in the inner part of the cave, where he can stand back up. Pulling out his flashlight, he begins to explore the cave. He can hear water drippings and the usual echo that the caves tend to have. After 10 minutes of exploring there, he finds another crawling spot that leads further into the cave. He looks at his watch and figures he will still have time to crawl to the other side to have a quick look around. Using the same strategy with his backpack, he begins to crawl in it, dragging his backpack with his feet and shining the flashlight ahead of him. Midway in, he can hear something clicking on the other side of the crawl space, but he's not scared. He's more curious over what it could be. At this point, he had crawled roughly about 15 feet into the crawl space and had about 10 feet of crawling left when suddenly two black shiny orbs appeared in front of him. On the other side of the crawling space, James immediately stopped. Now he's feeling a little scared and unsure whether he wants to continue crawling further in or not.
Hello?
Said James. "Hey, kid." Someone had replied to James from within the cave. Confused and scared, James didn't know what to do as he wasn't sure who it was, or what that person's intention was, or even why was that person in there. "Come on in, kid. I need your help." The voice sounded weird and a bit unsettling to James.
Who are you? What's your name?
James asked. "We could be friends. My name is Stag," said the figure on the other side of the cave. All James could see was two black shiny orbs in the end of the crawl space, and he wanted to make more out of it, but he couldn't. They were too big to be eyes. Being so, he was baffled, but at least felt at ease. But James still wouldn't crawl any closer. They began having a small conversation. Stag asked James whether he had a girlfriend or not, and many other questions. "So, what's going on in the world?"
Well, global warming for one, overpopulation in the cities, and of course, technology.
"Who's the president?"
Our current president is Donald Trump.
"Are there still communist countries?"
Oh yeah, communism is still around.
As the two had a long conversation through the crawl space, Stag started to ask weird questions, making James feel uncomfortable. "How far do you live from here?"
It's roughly 15 minutes from here, in walking distance.
"Do your parents love you very much?"
Of course they do. The parents are good. Make sure I have everything I need.
"What about things you want? Do they get them for you?"
If they had the money for the things I want, they would get it for me. Other than that, I save my allowance.
"If you went missing, would they look for you?" James felt some chills at this point with Stag's question. He felt something was wrong. "Well, would they look for you?"
I am more than sure that they would.
James started to go back out of the crawl space and kicking his backpack backwards with his feet. "Why are you leaving? I thought we could be friends."
I gotta go. I have to be back before sunset to steer the cattle back.
The clicking in the cave got more intense, and Stag sounded a little angry. "Don't worry about the cattle anymore. You're my next meal." Upon hearing this, James' heart dropped, and he tried to hurry back out of the crawl space, and he knew there was one more crawl space after that, to finally be out of the cave. He started backing out of there faster than he was, But to his horror, Stag also got into the crawl space, trying to get to him. And when this happened, James was able to make a terrifying discovery. Stag was no human. He looked like a man-sized insect, and now he knew that the two black shiny orbs were Stag's eyes staring at him. James had never felt fear like that before. Part of his body felt numb and paralyzed, but he knew he had to crawl out of there if he wanted to make it out alive. He makes it out of the crawling space and into the inner part of the cave. He gets ready to crawl the next and last crawling space, and he needed to do so quickly as Stag was crawling a lot faster than him. He decides to leave the backpack behind and gets into the crawling space and starts making his way out of the cave and can hear the clicking noise getting closer and more intense. Now James knew that it was Stag making that clicking noise the whole time. The closer the clicking noise got, the more petrified James felt, so finally James made it out of the final crawling space and ran back out of the cave, noticing the sun had set and it was now dark with the moon above him. James quickly mounts his horse and rushes out of there as fast as the horse would go. He looks back at the cave as he's riding away on the horse and sees a large beetle-like insect standing in the two black shiny orbs. James passes out from fear.
James! James! Wake up, son!
James wakes up and is back at home thanks to his good horse that, without being guided, still knew to take James home.
What happened to you, son?
It was James' dad. James starts explaining everything that happened to his dad, and they both decided to call the police. 15 minutes later, the police arrives, and James, with fear but accompanied by the police, shows them where the cave is located at. As soon as they arrive to the cave, it was already collapsed and no signs of Stag anywhere. This story was written by me. If you like my stories and wish to hear more, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.